I'm Eleanor Hayes, 72 years old. And on the night my only son walked down the aisle, I fell asleep staring at a stained ceiling tile in a nursing home instead of watching him say his vows. He and his beautiful bride called it what's best for everyone. I call it the moment I buried the last illusion I had about my boy. From that locked room, they thought they'd tucked me away like an old photograph. They didn't know I was about to pull a thread that would unravel their perfect, borrowed fairy tale in front of everyone they were trying so hard to impress. Before I begin, thank you for listening. It's strange, speaking into a camera, into a little blinking light, and feeling you out there somewhere. Tell me in the comments where you are, and what time it is where you're listening. It makes these memories feel less heavy when I know someone else is awake with me. And if you ever want to share your story, I'll leave my email in the description. I read them, not all at once, not always quickly, but I do. They remind me I'm not the only one who's been made to feel like a burden by the very people we gave our lives to. Now, let me tell you what really happened. My husband, Thomas, used to say our son had two hearts. One soft like a puppy, quick to love and eager to please. The other hard like a stone, always calculating, always watching for the angle. He'll be wonderful, Tom would say, if the right heart wins. When Tom died, the house got very quiet, too quiet. I suppose I wanted to believe the softer heart had won. Maybe that made me slow to see what was right in front of me. Tom's photograph still sits on the mantel. In it, he's mid-laugh, head tipped back, tie crooked, flour on his shirt from some kitchen disaster. That laughing, messy man and I spent 43 years in our little brick house at the edge of town. We paid off the mortgage one winter when my fingers were so cracked from the school cafeteria sinks I could barely button my coat. We bought savings bonds when other people bought vacations. We packed lunches instead of eating out. It wasn't glamorous, but there was pride in it. We built something steady. Our son, Michael, was the bright light of that steady life. He came into the world screaming and never really stopped. He had a way of filling every room, every conversation, every budget. Even when he was small, he talked like the world already belonged to him. We thought it was charm. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn. Single quotes to by the time I turned 70, I was a widow in a house that suddenly felt 2 sizes too big. The rhythm of my days was simple. Coffee in the blue mug with the chip on the rim. Walk to the corner and back. Phone calls with my sister on Thursdays. Church on Sundays. A pot of stew that lasted 3 days. On good afternoons, I'd sit in the garden with a book and pretend the creak of the gate was Tom coming home. When Michael told me he'd met someone, his voice changed over the phone. Lighter, younger, like the boy who used to run barefoot through puddles in our backyard. Her name's Sabrina, he said. You're going to love her, Mom. She's unbelievable. I pictured some soft, laughing woman who would sit at my table and ask about old stories. Who would want to know what kind of cake he liked as a child? The woman who walked into my kitchen 3 weeks later was not soft. Beautiful, yes, polished in a way I'd only seen on television. Her hair fell in waves that hadn't been born that way. Her nails were little moons of gloss. She wore a white blouse so crisp I was afraid to breathe near it, and shoes that looked like they had never once touched a patch of dirt. She kissed the air near my cheek and told me I had such a quaint little place. I wasn't sure if quaint was a compliment or a warning. Michael followed behind her like a man carrying a lit candle, all careful angles and eager eyes. He kept glancing at her, checking if she was comfortable, if the chair was too low, if the tea was too hot. When I asked Sabrina what she did, she launched into a stream of words about brand experiences and high-value clients. I taught second graders for 35 years. My brand was Band-Aids and reading circles. Our worlds brushed against each other like mismatched fabric. They announced their engagement over lasagna at my dining table. The ring sparkled. Sabrina sparkled. Michael sparkled so much I could almost see the boy who used to show me his spelling tests with both hands. I clapped. I cried. I hugged them both. I meant it. For all my misgivings, a mother always tucks hope into the corners of her heart. Maybe she would round his edges. Maybe he would soften hers. Maybe I would finally have a daughter. At first, the wedding talk was sweet. Church or garden, small or medium, chicken or beef. I listened. I nodded. I offered to bake cookies for the dessert table. Then the words changed. Estate, venue, signature cocktails, harpist, imported flowers. Guest list that read like the membership roll of a club I'd never be invited into. Sabrina's parents, apparently, moved in circles, where people flew to other countries to buy shoes. Somewhere, between handwritten calligraphy invitations and copper lantern installations, my son decided that my finances were too much for me to manage. Alone, he brought it up on a Sunday afternoon, when he knew my defenses were lowest. I'd made roast chicken. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary in comfort. He helped me load the dishwasher, drying plates with the dish towel Tom used to fling over his shoulder. "Mom," he said, his voice sliding into that careful tone children use when they're about to make you feel small. "Have you thought about simplifying things? You've got the house, the pension, the little investment account. That's a lot to stay on top of, with your eyesight, and everything going digital now." "I manage," I said, maybe a little too quickly. His eyes flicked to the reading glasses on the counter. The stack of envelopes by the phone. "I know you do," he said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But you shouldn't have to. You should be enjoying your time. Let me handle the boring stuff. I can set up automatic payments, track the statements, make sure you're getting the best interest. You just live." He smiled, those same dimples that used to get him extra cookies at school. "We can do a power of attorney, just for practicality. It won't change anything day to day. It just means I can help more." I heard the words that would become important later, power of attorney, but at that moment they were wrapped in the gauze of his concern. Padded by my loneliness and my tired eyes, I thought of the time I accidentally paid the gas bill twice. I thought of how hard it was to read those new pale blue bank statements. I thought of the empty chair across from me at the table. "All right," I said slowly, "if it makes things easier." His relief was immediate, like a salesman closing a deal. "You won't regret it, Mom. This is just me stepping up, like Dad would want." I signed the papers at his lawyer's office. The receptionist called me dear. The lawyer used words like convenience, continuity, standard arrangement. Michael beamed. I felt like I'd handed him a spare key to the house. I didn't realize I'd also handed him the blueprint. Time has a way of slipping when you're old. Days spill into each other like tea over saucer edges. But numbers don't slip. Numbers sit in straight lines and quietly scream when something is wrong. I've kept a little ledger notebook since the year Michael was born, a habit Tom teased me about. "Ellie and her little black book of pennies," he'd say. But that book bought school shoes and Christmas presents and patched roofs. After the power of attorney, I kept writing the numbers as I always had. Pension in, small pension from Tom's work, little dividend from the credit union, groceries out, electricity out, church donation out. Then, without my hand writing them, other numbers started to appear. Not in my notebook but in the statements Michael occasionally let me see. Wedding planning service, custom linens, advance to caterer, deposit to Harborview Estate. The amounts were not small. When I asked, lightly, about the balance one afternoon, he brushed it off. "Don't stress over the details, Mom. Everything's under control. We've consolidated some accounts to make things smoother. It all balances out." It didn't balance out. The figures on the page and the feeling in my chest both told me so. Still, I pushed that unease aside. I bought a lavender dress. It had delicate beading at the neckline that made me feel both silly and special. I practiced fastening the little hook at the back of the zipper. I wrote a speech on a pad of yellow paper in my careful, looping hand. I wrote about the day I brought Michael home from the hospital in a cardboard box on my lap. Because we couldn't afford a proper car seat yet. I wrote about Tom teaching him to ride a bike in the cracked driveway, both of them shouting and laughing. I wrote about love that doesn't keep score. A week before the wedding, they came by together. Sabrina's perfume drifted into the house before she did. Some expensive, cold scent that made my kitchen smell like a department store. Their faces had that tightness. The one people get when they've rehearsed something. "We need to chat." "Mom," Michael said, riffling through the mail on my counter like it belonged to him. I wiped my hands on a towel and sat. "Of course. Is something wrong with the venue?" Sabrina laughed a little, that thin, tinkling sound that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh no, Eleanor. Everything is grand. That's actually why we came. The guest list, the expectations, it's all gotten a bit bigger than we originally thought. My parents' crowd can be particular." Michael cleared his throat. "What Sabrina means is, there's a certain image, a standard. It's not just about us. It's about her family, her father's clients, the investors. There'll be press. It's a whole thing." I stared at my son. "I'm not sure what that has to do with me, dear." They exchanged a look. The kind of look that makes you feel as if you've missed the first half of a conversation about your own life. Sabrina leaned forward, her elbows resting lightly on my table, as if it were fragile. "We've noticed you get a little flustered at larger gatherings. You wander? You tell very long stories. It's adorable with family, but some of our guests might not understand." I felt my face heat. "I don't wander. I said sharply. I walked to the door to get more forks at your engagement party because you didn't have enough. Michael put up his hands, palms out, peacemaker. It's not an insult, Mom, it's just, we want you comfortable. These events can be overwhelming. The noise, the lights. We don't want you to feel out of place, or, for anything awkward to happen. There it was, the soft word they were dancing around, awkward, embarrassing. He couldn't say it. But it hung between us like a bad smell. So what exactly are you suggesting? I asked, each word clipped, very carefully placed. Sabrina's smile brightened. We've arranged something lovely for you. There's this new wellness residence just outside of town. Roseview. It's like a resort for seniors. Spa, gardens, gourmet meals. We've booked you a suite for the wedding weekend. You can relax without the chaos of the event. We'll visit you after. Bring photos. Cake, she said, cake as if I were a child being promised a treat. You want me, I said slowly, to sit in a home while my son gets married. Alone, so I don't embarrass you. That's a very harsh way of phrasing it, Sabrina murmured. How would you phrase it then? I turned to Michael. You're really going to stand there and send your own mother away on your wedding day? He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the sugar bowl instead. It's only for a couple of nights, Mom. You know crowds aren't your thing anymore. We can't risk. He stopped, swallowed. We have a lot riding on this. Sabrina's parents. Your whole life I've gone to school concerts with sticky floors and broken chairs and tinny microphones. I said quietly. I sat through long ceremonies and longer sermons. I watched you forget your lines and fall off bleachers. It never occurred to me to hide you so no one would feel awkward. Silence. The fridge hummed. A car passed outside. Sabrina sighed, impatience peeking through the sweetness. The booking is already made, Eleanor. We've paid for it. The car will pick you up Friday morning. It's not. That was the detail that lodged itself somewhere sharp inside me. Not we hope you'll come. Not would you be willing. Just a fait accompli decided. Done. You, old woman, are a piece on our board, and we have moved you. I nodded very slowly, though everything inside me was shaking. Then I suppose I had better pack, I said. They left relieved, as if a minor inconvenience had been dealt with. When the door closed behind them, I walked to my room and opened the wardrobe. The lavender dress swayed slightly on its hanger, as if someone had bumped it. The sight of it undid me. I pressed my forehead against the soft fabric and let the sobs come, hot and ugly and animal. The way they only do when no one can hear. By the time tears ran dry, something else had risen up to take their place. Not the kind of anger that makes you slam doors. The other kind, quiet, heavy, clear. I straightened, wiped my face, and sat down at my little writing desk. The wedding wasn't the first line they'd crossed. It was just the loudest. Whatever tenderness there had been still curled around my love for the boy he'd been. But it was no longer stronger than my need to protect what Tom and I had built. I may have been old. I was not stupid. And I was not powerless. Friday morning came gray and humid. The car they sent was sleek and black. The kind that looks out of place on our cracked sidewalk. The driver loaded my small suitcase into the trunk. I clutched my big old handbag like a lifeline. Michael kissed my cheek as if he were sending me off to a spa weekend instead of exile. Try to relax, okay, he said. We'll be thinking of you. No you won't, I answered pleasantly. That's why I'm going. He flinched. Just slightly. Then let me go. Roseview Residence was everything Sabrina had promised. Air that smelled faintly of lemon and something floral. Wide, gleaming hallways. Art on the walls that looked expensive and bland at the same time. Staff who smiled too much. It's just for 2 nights, the intake nurse chirped. Your son arranged such a lovely stay for you. We'll keep your phone at the desk so you're not bothered. Time to unplug and unwind. I watched her slip my smartphone into a labeled envelope like it was being checked into evidence. The click of the little safe door closing sounded louder than it should have. There, she said, satisfied. No distractions. Just rest. Rest as if you can rest with your heart in a vice. They showed me to a guest suite. Neutral tones. A bed with corners sharp enough to cut yourself on. A television bolted to the wall. A window that overlooked a courtyard with a fountain and roses arranged so precisely they might as well have been painted on. It was, in its way, lovely. And utterly without soul. When the nurse left, the silence rushed in. I sat on the bed. My hands found the familiar worn leather of my bag, thumbs running over the crease Tom's hand had made years ago. He gave it to me on our 25th anniversary. For all the lives you carry, he said. I opened it now. Fingers searching for something I wasn't sure I had. Tissues, keys, coin purse. A wrinkled church bulletin. Then, in the inner zipped pocket I almost never used, my fingers brushed cold plastic. I pulled it out, an old flip phone. Gray, scratched, the emergency phone. Tom had insisted we buy back when Michael first moved out. Just in case the fancy one breaks, he'd said, or if there's a storm and the lines go funny. Michael had rolled his eyes back then. Mom, nobody uses those dinosaur things anymore. I'd kept it anyway. Force of habit. I charged it once a month, topped up the credit when I remembered. A relic, an afterthought. Now, in that too-clean room, lit by flat daylight, it sat in my palm like a small, unexpected miracle. I pressed the button. For a terrible second, nothing happened. Then the screen woke up in a washed-out green glow. It showed the date, a little battery symbol, and bless you, Tom, 3 bars of signal. I knew you were right, I whispered, my throat tight. I didn't call Michael. I didn't call Sabrina. I called the number on the back of my bank card. I had it written in my ledger, 2 old habits. The automated voice asked for options. I listened, pressed 2 for fraud. A real human answered, eventually, a young woman who called me ma'am in a way that didn't feel condescending. Ma'am, how can I help you today? My name is Eleanor Hayes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm calling to report that my power of attorney has misused my accounts. I believe there has been financial exploitation. The person with that power is my son. There was a pause, the kind that happens when the script in front of someone doesn't quite cover what you've just said. I'm very sorry to hear that, Mrs. Hayes. Can you tell me what's going on? I told her. Not all the pain. Not about the dress or the toast or the nursing home. Just the facts. The new joint account. The large transfers labeled venue and event services that I had not authorized, for my benefit, from funds that were supposed to keep me warm and fed for whatever years I had left. I want a hold placed on any account he can touch. I said, effective immediately. If you need to speak to me, you call this number. Not my son, not his fiancée, me. She took my information. Ask security questions. I answered without hesitation. My mother's maiden name. The street I grew up on. The amount of my last legitimate withdrawal. These are the little stones women of my generation keep in our pockets. We don't forget them. Mrs. Hayes, she said finally, given what you've reported, we can freeze activity on the accounts that list a power of attorney while our fraud team reviews. You'll need to come in person with identification to fully revoke the POA, but we can stop outgoing transfers now. Do it, I said, and if any large payments are pending, especially today or tomorrow, I do not consent to them being honored. I need those funds to survive. My son has other options. I do not. She hesitated only a moment. Yes, ma'am. I've put a note on your file. There are some scheduled payments to a hospitality venue and catering company today. Those will be stopped by the freeze. Thank you, I said. When I hung up, my hand was shaking. I sat very still and listened to my own breath. In, out, somewhere. An announcement chirped that lunch would be served in the dining room. I ignored it. My next call was to the pension office. Different voice, different hold music, same story. I used words I'd never imagined saying out loud. Elder abuse, unauthorized expenditure, revocation of consent. I said Tom's name, and my own, and repeated, again and again, I am not confused. I am not incapacitated. I am telling you now, clearly, that my son is using my benefits in ways I did not agree to. They promised an immediate suspension of external changes pending review. They said words like investigation and compliance department. For the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy, not yet, just the faintest sense that I was no longer completely at someone else's mercy. Saturday dawned bright, almost cruelly cheerful. Sunlight bounced off the rosebushes in the courtyard. Somewhere in town, Sabrina was having someone paint blush onto her cheeks. Curled hair, white dress. Somewhere, Michael was adjusting cufflinks and practicing his smile in the mirror. My lavender dress hung back in my dark closet. I wore the same soft cardigan I'd arrived in. Time moved strangely that morning. I watched the clock, though I didn't need to. My bones knew what time it was. Late morning, when flowers usually arrive at venues. Noon, when caterers start to set tables. 1 o'clock, when photographers circle like bees. At 11:15, my little phone buzzed. Mom. Michael's voice cracked right on the word. He wasn't calm this time. He wasn't reasonable. He sounded like a man standing on a rug that had just been yanked. What did you do? My card's not working. The bank is saying there's a hold. The florist is here, and they're refusing to unload the arrangements. They want a different form of payment. The venue manager says the final transfer bounced. Fix it. Call them and fix it. I let a beat pass. 2, 3. I could hear voices behind him, sharp and panicked. A woman's raised tone. Another man, stern. Someone saying, "We need this sorted now or we're canceling." "Good morning, Michael," I said. "Congratulations on your almost wedding day." "You think this is funny?" he shouted. "Mom, Sabrina's parents are here. The coordinator is freaking out. They're saying there is no money." I told them. "My mother's pension." "Stop," I said, and my voice cut through his like a knife. "Stop saying my pension like it's yours." He went quiet, chest heaving on the other end of the line. I could almost see his face, flushed, stunned that I would dare take that tone. "I spoke to the bank," I said, "and to the pension office. I am not comfortable with my life savings being poured into a single afternoon meant to impress people who think I'm unfit to sit in the back row. So I stopped it." "You can't do that," he sputtered. "You gave me power of attorney. I can." And I did, because that power was granted for my benefit, not so you could buy towers of champagne while I wonder if I can afford my medication in 10 years. There was a clatter on his end, as if he'd set the phone down and picked it up again. "You're ruining everything," he hissed. "Do you understand that? Everything. Sabrina's mother is threatening to call the whole thing off. The vendors are walking. Do you have any idea what that looks like? How this makes me look?" "I suppose," I said, "it makes you look exactly like what you are. A man who tried to build his future with someone else's safety net. If you are humiliated today, Michael, it's because of what you did, not because I refused to keep paying for it." He went silent, then shifted tactics. He'd always been quick that way. "Mom, please," he said, suddenly softer. "We can sort it out later. Just let the payments go through today. It's already in motion. You won't even notice." "I already noticed," I answered. "And later, I'll need to eat. I'll need heat in January. I'll need a roof that doesn't leak. I may forget where I put my glasses, Michael, but I remember every hour your father worked overtime to put money into those accounts. I remember every time we said no to something we wanted so we could say yes to the future. I will not let the last of that be swallowed by a party I'm not allowed to attend." In the background, a woman's voice, sharp and unfamiliar, cut in. "You said it was handled. Michael, if this collapses because you lied about the money, give me a minute," he snapped at her, voice cracking again. "I think I've said all I need to say," I told him. "I hope, one day, you understand why, but that day is not today." "Don't you hang up," he began, but I already had. I lay back on the too firm pillow and held the phone to my chest. My heart was pounding. My hands shook. I felt sick and powerful and broken all at once. I didn't get up when they announced lunch. I didn't get up when someone knocked to invite me to bingo. I stayed there, in that rectangle of a room, and listened to the quiet hum of the building and the louder hum of my own thoughts. Through the afternoon, the voicemails came. His Sabrina's, a woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Ellison, her voice dripping with outrage, informing me that my stunt had ruined a significant social event. I let them all go to voicemail. Later, I'd listen. At that moment, I didn't owe any of them the sound of my breathing. By evening, I had the shape of the day from those messages. The florist packed up and left. The caterer refused to serve without payment. The estate manager shut down the ballroom and offered the space to another event. Sabrina's parents, who had apparently contributed their own funds but expected matching commitment from the groom's side, realized that the groom's side was funded by a woman in a cardigan with a ledger book and that she had just shut the tap. The wedding did not happen. Not that day. Maybe not ever. I don't know if Sabrina eventually found another groom who fit her parents' plans better. I do know that my son's face, once photographed on a save-the-date card smiling beside a woman in white, never appeared in those glossy circles the way he'd hoped. On Sunday afternoon, a different nurse came to my room, older, softer around the eyes. "Miss Hayes," she said, "your discharge papers are ready, if you're still planning to leave today." "Planning?" I asked, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I wasn't aware I'd signed away my right to decide that. She smiled, an actual smile, not the employee kind. "I read your chart," she said quietly, "and the local paper. Sometimes families think these places are storage units. Sometimes they forget the people they're trying to shelve still have keys of their own." She handed me my smartphone back. The envelope crinkled. "I took the liberty of making sure your numbers are in this one too," she added, nodding at the flick phone on the nightstand. "Just in case." I liked her immediately. I left Roseview with my suitcase in one hand and my handbag on my arm. The automatic doors slid open with a sigh that sounded like relief. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and exhaust and freedom. My house was exactly where I left it. The roses in front, a little thirsty. The paint on the porch rail, still chipped. The key turned in the lock with a familiar resistance. Home. Inside everything was the same, and nothing was. The lavender dress still hung behind my other clothes. The speech lay folded in the drawer of my bedside table. I opened it, read the first lines, then folded it again and put it back. That speech belonged to a version of my life that didn't happen. It didn't need to be burned or rewritten. It could just rest. Asterisk, I called a lawyer on Monday. Not the one who'd drawn up the power of attorney papers for Michael. A woman recommended by a neighbor who'd quietly lost her own house and then, thankfully, got it back. Her name was Priya. She wore sensible shoes and eyed my ledger with respect. We revoke it, she said. We file reports with the bank and pension office. We request that any investigation into your son's handling of your accounts include your testimony. We update your will. And we put in writing what you will and will not allow any future caregiver to do with your money. Will it ruin him? I asked. The question that had been scraping at the back of my mind. She held my gaze. He already did that part himself. She said gently, you're just turning the light on. So we did. We signed papers. We sent letters. We gathered statements from the bank and pension office, each one a little stone in the wall between my son and my survival. It was tedious and bleak and oddly empowering. For a while, I didn't hear from Michael. Silence, where his voice used to be. No Sunday check-ins. No texts about football games. The house was quieter than ever. But there was a different kind of quiet now. Not the expectant one that waits for a knock. The kind that finally stops pretending. Weeks later, I took the bus to the shore. Not far. Just an hour away. There's a stretch of coastline where Tom and I used to rent a tiny cabin when Michael was little. He would collect shells and bring me the broken ones, insisting they were the best because they showed how they work inside. One rented that cabin for 3 nights. The mattress was lumpy. The tap dripped. It was perfect. In the evenings, I sat on the old wooden steps and watched the sky bleed pink into orange, into purple, over the water. The waves came and went and came again, indifferent to weddings and bank accounts and broken hearts. I let them wash some of the bitterness out of me. Not all. Enough that I could breathe without tasting it. On the second night, my old flip phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won. Mom, he said. His voice was smaller. No arrogance. Just air and regret. Hello, Michael, I said, eyes on the horizon. I heard from the bank, he said, and from some investigator at the pension office. They said you told them everything. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, should I? You should be grateful, I replied. If I'd kept pretending, you might have sunk us both. There was a shaky inhale. The wedding's off, he said, in case you hadn't guessed. Her parents well? It doesn't matter. She doesn't want anything to do with me. A humorless laugh. Turns out people don't like finding out the fancy party isn't paid for. People also don't like finding out their mother has been treated like a problem to be solved. I said quietly. I know, he whispered. I know that now. I don't even know when I started thinking about you, as a resource instead of a person. I told myself I'd pay it back. That it was temporary. That you didn't really use the money anyway. That you had more than you needed. There was always some excuse. It all sounds disgusting when I say it out loud. I didn't rush to comfort him. It went against 39 years of muscle memory, but I held the silence, let it stretch until it became honest. I'm in debt, he continued. Real debt, the kind you can't charm your way out of. I might lose the apartment. I don't know. And everyone knows about the wedding, about what I did. I can't even look people in the eye. You were willing to let me lose everything quietly, I said, so you could keep looking them in the eye a little longer. He flinched audibly. I know. I don't have any right to ask anything of you, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry, not the kind of sorry that hopes you'll fix it. The real kind. The kind that knows you don't owe me forgiveness. I just needed you to know I'm not pretending it wasn't what it was anymore. The waves shushed in and out. In and out. The wind lifted my hair. On the sand, a little boy chased a gull that would always be just out of reach. Michael, I said, tasting his name the way you taste something you're not sure has gone off yet. I will always remember the little boy who used to bring me wildflowers in juice glasses and call them bouquets. I will always love that boy. I will always be, in some bone-deep way, your mother. That doesn't disappear, but love is not the same as access. You burned a bridge and then tried to charge me for the lumber. I walked off that bridge. I'm not crossing it again. He was crying now, quietly, the way people do when they finally understand there's no bargain to be struck. Does that mean you'll never speak to me again? He asked. It means, I said, choosing each word with care, that if you build something new on your side of the river, something honest, something earned, something that doesn't depend on me being small and silent, maybe one day I'll come and stand on my bank and wave. Maybe we'll shout to each other across the water. Maybe, in time, we'll find a way to meet in the middle without anyone drowning, but I will not swim to you while you're still carrying stones in your pockets. He let out a breath that sounded like it took a piece of him with it. I understand, he said. At least, I'm trying to. That's your work now, I replied. Mine is making the most of the years I have left without apologizing for existing. We said goodbye, not in the tidy Hallmark way, in the way real goodbyes sound messy, half-formed, hanging in the air long after the call ends. I closed the phone and watched the sun drop into the line where sky meets water. I thought about Tom, about what he'd say. He'd be heartbroken. He'd be proud. People think those things can't sit in the same body. They can. I am living proof. When I came home from the coast, I did small, radical things. I changed my will. I left most of what I have to a scholarship fund for kids from our old neighborhood and a little to my niece, who visits without needing anything. I booked a weekend bus tour by myself and sat next to a woman my age, who told me about the time she hitchhiked through Europe with a backpack and a broken heart. I joined a support group at the community center for seniors dealing with family estrangement. Though we all called it what it felt like, being thrown away. I started talking, not just to lawyers and bank clerks, 2 other faces lined like mine, in church basements, at the senior center, now here, to you. I discovered a terrible and comforting truth. My story is not rare. It is a pattern, a quiet epidemic of grown children who see their parents aging as a shortcut, a resource, a vault. So I sit here tonight, in my living room with the lamp that leans a little and the clock that ticks too loud. And I tell you this not because I want revenge. That part already happened in a hotel ballroom I never saw. I tell you because there will be other versions of me listening, other elders who feel the ground shifting under their feet, who sense the soft words and the sharp intentions behind them. If that's you, hear this from an old woman who has walked through it. You are not a burden. You are not an embarrassment. You are not a wallet with legs. You are the sum of every morning you got up when you didn't want to, every bill you paid when it would have been easier to ignore it, every meal you put on a table you bought with your own hands. Your name on a document is not a formality, it is power. Don't sign it away without a clear, cold understanding of what it means. And if you have already signed it, and something feels wrong, it is not too late to reach for the phone. Sometimes justice doesn't come with trumpets. Sometimes it looks like an old flip phone buzzing in a too quiet room. Sometimes it sounds like your own voice, steady for the first time in years, saying no, this is mine, I choose what happens now. The porch light outside my house buzzes faintly when I turn it on. The bulb is a little old. I should probably replace it, but I like it that way. Imperfect, flickering sometimes, still refusing to go out. On nights when sleep won't come, I sit in my chair by that window and watch the light pool on the front step. Somewhere in this town, my son is putting his life back together, brick by hard-earned brick. Or he isn't. That's his road. Mine leads here, to this worn armchair and this cup of tea and this story spoken into the dark. I think about that room at Roseview, the one they tried to make my world. The bed, the fountain, the door that locked from the outside. And I think about the little click my phone made when it powered on. 2 sounds, 2 cages, only one of them opened. I'm old enough now to know that closure is a myth we sell to the young. Things don't wrap up neatly. They fade. They fray. They hurt less over time, if we're lucky, but they never quite disappear. I will always feel the bruise of that weekend, when my son chose his public image over my dignity. I will always hear the echo of his voice begging me to fund his fantasy. I will always see the look he gave the sugar bowl instead of my face. But I will also always remember the way my own voice sounded that morning on the phone. Clear as a bell, when I finally chose myself. If you listen closely, there's a moment somewhere between shame and rage when something inside you shifts. A small, stubborn part of you stands up, dusts off her knees, and says, very quietly, not anymore. That's the moment that saved me. And if you're sitting there in your kitchen, or your room, or your own Too Bright facility, wondering if you're allowed to feel that shift, to follow it, to say no, at last consider this your sign. Even the oldest, quietest mothers are allowed to choose themselves in the end. That's the whole story. Or at least, the part of it I'm ready to tell tonight. The rest lives in the spaces between these words. in the soft places where love and hurt still sit side by side, sharing a cup of tea. I'll leave the porch light on a little longer, just in case you're out there, walking your own road, needing to see that somewhere, an old woman who refused to disappear is still here, still speaking, still remembering, and finally, no longer ashamed to take up space in her own life.